Welcome to our first vlog. I'm Andrew, this is my buddy Alex, and tonight we're going to be talking about poverty.
Yeah, so first we have to start with defining poverty. I guess mainstream definition would be that poverty situation in which one does not have sufficient financial resources to provide for themselves and or their family.
Exactly, but we don't believe this definition really captures the whole story. We believe that poverty is a situation when one lacks the ability to achieve a basic level of financial stability.
And because poverty is a matter of what a person is able to do, it ought to be measured with capabilities in mind. So we believe the best form of measuring poverty is a quasi-relative measurement that accounts for an individual's capacity to achieve a decent standard of living. So let's talk about capabilities. Andrew, would you mind talking about what capabilities are?
So basically we're going to look at two kinds of capabilities. The first one is inherent capabilities. This is pretty much either the talents a person was born with or has acquired throughout their lives that allows them to do certain things. For example, if a person has two walking legs, you could say that walking is an internal capability for that person. The other type of capability is a combined capability. And the best way to understand this type of capabilities is to see them as freedoms or rights or institutions that allow one to take advantage of their internal capabilities. For example, political knowledge is an internal capability, but a right to a free and equal vote could be called a combined capability.
These capabilities are critical because they lead to what Sen defines as functionings, or the ability to achieve financial well-being. It can be said that without capabilities such as a good education, it's nearly impossible to achieve financially. Andrew, can you explain how we differentiate from capabilities and functionings, please?
Yeah, so take this example. So in America, every citizen is allowed to vote. Say that I decide not to vote. I would have the capability to vote, but I'm just choosing not to function. Take that situation versus someone in North Korea. They have no say or no right to vote over there. They have no effect on the outcome of an election, so they don't vote, but they never had the capability to vote in the first place.
Okay. Talking a little more on capabilities, Nussbaum, a famous poverty researcher, highlights 10 basic capabilities that she believes are critical to human existence. These include, but are not limited to, life, self-explanatory, bodily health, rights to senses, imagination, and free thought, emotions and or attachments, play or being able to have fun, and control over one's environment, politically and materially, as in having the right to own land.
Go ahead.
These capabilities are part of what makes us human, and these capabilities are part of, without these capabilities, it'd be difficult to maximize our level of achievement. Now, before we talk about poverty, how it's measured today, we just talk more in depth about how we think it should be, how it should be measured in a perfect world, and how it could realistically be measured today.
So basically we would like to see poverty be measured entirely based on what a person is capable of achieving. If a person is unable to achieve a basic level of financial security, then based on their lack of capabilities, then we should consider them to be impoverished. However, we understand that this would be an extremely difficult thing to measure, as doing so would require understanding each individual in a society on a very intricate level, and knowing everything that they're capable of, which would be very hard. So instead, we think that the SPM, which we're going to talk about more a little bit later, is the best modern day solution available to measure poverty. First of all, because it's quasi-relative, which means that it takes good aspects of absolute measures, which makes it easy to understand and easy to actually measure, and combines it with some relative measures, which allow each individual to be compared based on those around them and the situation of themselves versus the situation of others. With this knowledge in mind, even though capabilities are not directly measured in this SPM, we can expect that, at least for the most part, the poverty threshold is going to be met by people with the basic capabilities and not met by people who lack those capabilities.
Keep in mind how capabilities lead to one's economic achievement. Let's take a look at several existing measures of poverty. First, we have the OPM, developed by Molly Roshansky. This is the measurement that you hear about in the news every day. The OPM is an absolute measure of poverty. It imposes a poverty threshold by calculating the cost of a year's worth of baseline level, simple but nutritious diet, and multiplying that number by 3. This is because in the 60s, it was estimated that food composed for about a third of the average person's yearly expenditures. We believe that this measurement has some advantages, but it's really outweighed by the downside of the system. This is an easy way to measure poverty and conceptually understand it, but we believe the OPM misses out on several very important things.
Well, first, the OPM does not accurately represent the family. When the OPM measures each family's poverty threshold, it counts those related by blood or marriage and living in the same house. Amazingly, this measurement does not include the homeless. So the upwards of 500,000 homeless people living in the United States in 2017 were not counted at all by this poverty measure. Not to mention that when the measure was created, food accounted for 1/3 of the average person's expenditure, but today it's more like 1/6. Meaning that people need to spend more on other things today than they used to. This failure to adjust highlights a key deficiency of the OPM, which is its inability to adjust to a rising standard of living. So it's really a pretty important shortcoming that it doesn't account for like someone's expenditure on clothing, childcare, medical out-of-pocket costs, which are also called MOOPs, or utilities.
Also, it doesn't include forms of in-kind benefits such as food stamps or EITC, otherwise known as the Earned Income Tax Credit.
This can make it hard to judge any policy effect on the rate of poverty because government puts most of their budget for helping poverty relief into these kind of benefits, but it actually doesn't show up as any kind of effect on the poverty rate.
Next up, there's the HDI. This is the most capabilities approach-based system we will talk about. HDI, or Human Development Index, measures a country based on the following 3 things: life expectancy, GDP per capita, and educational opportunities. This is a useful measurement because it allows us to observe countries relative to each other. There are several shortcomings to this method as well, however.
First of all, one of the things that makes measuring capabilities so difficult is that a lot of the times they are qualitative assessments, and it's really difficult to assign a concrete quantitative rating on these issues. So take the United States. The HDI rates each country based on its meeting educational opportunity, life expectancy, and GDP per capita. So we're a pretty developed country. We're actually ranked 13th on the HDI scale, but that's misleading because if you pay attention to the news, you know that poverty is a gigantic issue in the United States and it can't be overlooked.
Yes. And the last of the big 3 and our preferred method of measuring poverty is the SPM, or Supplemental Poverty Measure. The SPM is a fairly recent measure created by the Census Bureau and succeeds in most places where the OPM failed. For starters, the SPM accounts for things the OPM emits, including taxes, in-kind benefits, MOOPs, government programs, and many other factors that affects a person's capabilities. And also very important, the SPM includes homeless people.
Right, so the SPM is measured on a regional basis and is calculated by taking the median expenditure on FCSUs, or food, clother, shelter, and utilities, and dividing the sum of the median FCSU by 3. Another upside of the SPM is that it accounts for in-kind benefits, so policy effects are easier to gauge. And it accounts for other necessary costs, including transportation to work, childcare, and a few others, including minor costs for like personal transportation that everyone needs.
All right. This method isn't perfect. I don't know if any method can be, and we believe that for it to be perfect, it would need to incorporate some of SEN's capabilities approaches in order to make it more comprehensive. However, between the 3, this is our preferred method, because first it is a quasi-relative and adjusts the standard of living by measuring expenditure on necessities other than just food. This will make the poverty line more realistic.
Also, with the poverty line in place, this measurement is not hard to measure. It also allows for geographical differences and poverty lines based on relative standards. Take somebody living in Los Angeles, for example, where incomes are way higher and price of living is way higher. So this should also be reflected in the poverty threshold relative to that area.
Poverty is a widespread and serious issue that is debated heavily today. Poverty is a very difficult subject to define and measure, but we believe it ought to be defined on a personal level of capabilities. However, obviously, it's extremely difficult to measure poverty in a way, and so we believe the SPM translates capabilities into achievement best, and therefore is the best available measure that we have.
Thank you very much. If you like this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Thank you.
Comments. Thank you. Have a nice day.
Also, don't forget to check out the Works Cited page in the comment section.
Yes, very important, very important. Couldn't have done them without them.